Hello there, I hope you're doing well. So with this video, I plan to start a new series called Web Development, or rather Basics of Web Development, which will focus on teaching you basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and how we can put all of these technologies together to build really cool websites. Now, to be very honest, this series or the videos in these series are catered towards beginner or intermediate level. So if you already know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, maybe it's not going to be that helpful, but this is really directed towards people who are getting started with web development. So throughout the series, we will cover basics of HTML, basics of CSS, basics of JavaScript, and then towards the end of the series, we'll work on a project that will bring together all of these technologies and build a really nice website. So before we get started, what I want to discuss is the tools that we're going to use throughout the series if you plan to follow along. We would need two tools mainly. The first one would be a web browser of your choice, and the second one would be a text editor. I would recommend Visual Studio Code if you're starting out, but if you prefer another text editor, that's up to you. The reason I recommend Visual Studio Code is because it's lightweight and is basically used for many technologies related to web. So it's going to be helpful to learn to use this tool. So the first thing you would do is you would go to code.visualstudio.com and you'll probably see a download button. Would be different depending on your operating system. So you go ahead and download that. And once you have installed Visual Studio Code on your device, on your laptop, you would see something like this when you open it up. Now, this is basically an editor, a text editor, meaning this is where we write all our code for our website, and it's used for basically writing code, debugging, testing, all of those things. We'll not get into that much of detail, but we'll use it basically for writing code for our website and for running it. Now, let's start with the first lesson, as we can call it. In this video, we will cover the basic of HTML, maybe the first part, and it is going to give you a bit of an idea of how websites are generally created. So the number one thing that you need to know is how do we structure code, basically. So whenever you want to create anything, a website, a project, a mobile, whatever you want to create in coding, whenever we want to create a project, the first thing you do is you create a folder. Okay, you create a new folder and you put all your code in that folder. That's how it is done in usually everything. So in order to get started right now, what I'm going to do is I'll click on open for now, and I will probably go to my desktop and create a new folder here. I'll name it lesson 1, for example. And then press create or press enter and click on open. And this opens your folder within Visual Studio Code. That's how usually we work with every project in, let's say, IT. You might get this message, whether to trust the author. Basically, you're saying, do you really want to trust the source where you're opening this code from or this folder from? And I will just click on yes, trust the author, and that should be it. So this is our folder, project folder, where we will put all our codes. And if you go to your desktop, you can see that it has created a lesson 1 folder here for you. I don't know why it's not moving up, but anyway, so all our code is going to now be contained in lesson 1 folder. Now, usually when we create websites, the first time you visit any website, it goes to something called Index.html, and I'll explain that in a minute. But what we're going to do right now is you will see this icon. If you hover over it, it says new file. If you click on it, you can give it a name, and I'm going to give it a name called Index.html. Okay. Now Index.html is just like any other file, but the difference here is this is the file that will open up when someone goes to your website. So let's say we've built a very cool website and somebody wants to visit that website. The first page that is going to load is Index.html. Now, why do we have .html? .html here, for example, I'll just write it here for now. .html is the extension. Every file has an extension, and the extension just really tells the computer what kind of data this file holds or how to open this file. So if you have any file that ends with .html, it's going to open up in a browser, usually your default browser. If you have a file called .doc, D-O-C, that's going to open up with Word. If you have a file called, a file with extension called, let's say, .txt, it might open with Notepad or any other text editor. The extension at the end of a file basically is a way to tell the computer what software you should open it with and what data this file has. Now, what really is HTML, right? So HTML is called a markup language. It's not really a coding or a programming language, but it's like it's like a language that is used to structure text in your in a web page, for example. So when you go to any website, let's go to this website here. You have this web page here, right? So you can see that this is text, this is a button, this is a picture, this is a text again, this is a button, text again. So the basic things that are displayed here, the text, the buttons, the images, whatever it is, how do we structure that? Like, for example, where does this code go? Sorry, where does this text go? It goes after this whole section, right? So how does the web page know? That's through HTML. So the placement of these texts and the placement of these images are determined through HTML code that you write. I'll give you a very small example just so you can understand what is happening. So let's create something so we can see how it works. Now in HTML, to write HTML, you need to use something called elements, okay? So for example, we have an element called paragraph that is used to display paragraphs. We have an element called heading that is used to display heading. We have element called image that is used to display image, so on and so forth. We have elements for everything, okay? Now, you don't need to go and memorize all of these elements. The more you practice HTML, the more you will learn. You know, sometimes you don't know how to display an image, let's say. So what do? You go on Google, you type how to display image in HTML, and it shows you the way, how would you use an element for an image here. So like with practice, with more work that you put in on building websites, you will learn all the elements that are there, but you don't have to go and memorize them. Now, to create an element in HTML, for example, I want to create a paragraph in my HTML, or I want to create a paragraph on my website, on this web page. I have to use something called tags, okay? And tags are written in this way. This symbol, I do not know which this one is. Is it greater than or less than? I'm not sure. But the opening angle bracket, P, stands for paragraph. And you can see when you type this in Visual Studio Code, it kind of gives you a little bit of an explanation of what this is used for. So when I write P, it tells me P is an element that represents paragraph. So P tag, this is actually a tag. When we write it this way, it's actually a tag. So the P tag represents a paragraph element, okay? And now you can notice I've written this tag and it automatically closed it for me. This is a closing tag, okay? So this is an opening tag and this is a closing tag for a paragraph. So whatever you write in between will be considered a paragraph. So for example, this is a paragraph, okay? So this opening tag, the opening P tag signifies that this is where the paragraph starts, and this signifies that this is where the paragraph ends. The only difference between the two is you have this forward slash, okay? So this is how we write basic HTML. Now there are some tags that we have that don't have a closing tag, but we will look at that later. But usually all the tags have an opening tag, all the elements have an opening tag and a closing tag to signify that this is where it starts and this is where it ends. Now I'm going to remove this, okay, save this, and I will try to run this. So I can go to run, for example, and run and debug, and I want to open it with Chrome. And you can see it has opened the file that I have, which is Index.html. And within this HTML file, I have a paragraph that says this is a paragraph. I can add another paragraph, or let's just change this. Hello, this is my first website. And then another paragraph, coding is so much fun. I hope so. And we can refresh this. You can either press here to reload the page or use Command R or Control R if you are on Windows. So Command R, and it refreshes the page, and now you can see there's a paragraph that is hello, this is my first website, and there's another paragraph that's coding is so much fun. So we have a P tag, which signifies a paragraph element used to write paragraphs. Now I can have something called a heading as well. There's another element called heading, and to add headings you can use something called H, and then you have 6 versions, and these versions are just different sizes. So the biggest size is H1 and the smallest one is H6. So for example, H1, and again you have an opening tag here and then you have a closing tag here, and then within the tag I can write created by Muzaffar. And if I go back, refresh, and now you can see it's a heading. It has a very different size and font style basically when you compare it to a paragraph. So it's a bit larger in size, it's a bit bolder. So that's H1 element, heading 1. And then you can have multiple other headings as well, just to show you the difference. If we go back, refresh, and now you can see the different sizes. All of them are headings, but they're used for different places. For example, this can be a title on your page, this can be a subheading, this can be a little bit in another place, whatever, however you choose it to be. And you can see how they're structured one after the other, right? So the way you write it here, in the order that you specify it here, it's going to follow the same order when it shows up on your web page. So this is basically HTML. You kind of structure your content on your web pages. So we've looked at 2 elements so far. We've looked at paragraphs, we've looked at H1, H2, H3, all the heading basically. So that is the basic elements for you. Now we have something called, actually before that, let's show you how you can, so this is one way. You've written it here, right? You've written all your code here, and you can now see the the result of your HTML code in the web page. If you right click on your web page, you see two options: view page source and inspect. Okay, if I click on view page source, what happens is it shows me the code that is written for this website, the HTML code basically. And you can see this same code is actually the same thing that we've written in our Index.html file. So that's one way of looking at. It's helpful in this way because sometimes you want to just view things on different websites and you can look at them this way, or you can even use the inspect option, which does the same thing, but this time you can see what is highlighted where, or what section is shown up where. So I can see that this one is the P or the paragraph element, this one is the next paragraph, so on and so forth. I can even click on this button here that can allow me to see the different parts of the web page, and they will be highlighted as well on this section. So this is very, 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 very useful when you're actually debugging. So basically, let's say you've written some code in your HTML, but it's not working. So this is a great place to come and figure it out by just, hovering over, okay, what is happening where? Okay. So this is one of the two ways you can use to basically look at websites or debug your own website. Okay. So that is the basics of two of the elements. Now there are many, many more elements. We'll look at them together. But before that, if you go to any website, let's try to go to this one. If I click on view page source, you'll see it's a bit different. It has so much code, but it looks a little bit different. If you go to any website, you'll always see this specific section. Okay, it's larger here, but you don't need to write this large of a section. This is called, in HTML, what we call it is boilerplate code, which is the code that you can start your website with. So basically, you have something called doc type HTML, which just says that this is a HTML page, basically a HTML document. And then you have something called HTML tag. Okay, so you have an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag. Everything goes within these two tags. Whatever code you want to write goes within these two tags. Now you will notice this specific tag does not have a closing tag. That's an exception. Okay, the doc type element does not have any closing tags. The HTML, however, always has to have an opening tag and a closing tag. Within the HTML tags, we have something called head. Okay, and then we have something called body. Okay, again, you will notice that there's an opening tag and a closing tag for both head and body. Now, the head tag represents the information about the website that is not usually visible most of the times, but some of the metadata, basically some of the information that is useful for the website but is not generally visible. Okay, all of the visible things, all of the code that you're going to write, all of this code that we have will go into body always. So the body is where we actually write the code, and the head is just to give a little bit of information. You will notice that I have added the head and the body tag within the HTML tag. This is called nesting. So basically, when you have a tag within some other tag, it's basically called a concept of nesting. So what happens is this element becomes a child to the outer element. So the inner element becomes a child to the outer element, or we can say the outer element is the parent of the inner elements. Right now it's not that important for you to understand this in depth, but when we cover CSS, it's going to be very important too for you to know the parent-child relationship. So when we're nesting, which means you have one, within an element, you have one or more elements, that is considered nesting. When you're nesting, it creates a parent-child relationship between the elements. You will also notice something called something here, that when I created the HTML tag and I added the head and the body tag within the HTML tag, I moved it a few spaces. This is called indentation. It's not really useful. I mean, it is not, I don't mean it's not useful. It's like not needed. I can write it this way as well and it will work perfectly fine. But this is not readable for me as a developer. And if I have 3 other people or 4 other people working with me, reading code like this is not easy. So to make it readable, what we do is we keep them indented. So for example, if you have a parent-child kind of elements, you need to keep them indented. So you have HTML, the head should be a little bit on the right, and the body also should be a little bit on the right. Why did I keep them on the same line? Because both of these are child's or children elements for HTML. If I had something within head, it will go a little bit further. So it should always be indented so that it is easier to read. Now, in the head element, there is one thing that we have which is called title, and I can give it a title here called lesson 1. So there is an element that we use within the head element. Now this is important. The title element goes within the head element. So when you use the title element here and you say lesson 1, you can see, I can actually, let's duplicate it for a minute. Okay, so you can see now here at the top of the tab, the name has changed from Index.html to lesson 1. Now this is because I've given it a title here. So the title basically changes the name of the website or whatever is represented on the tab of the web page. So this is title for you. We have something else called meta, which is used for extra information about your website. And you can write something called car set. Not sure what it was. Something like that. I'm not sure. I'll show you what is the actual way of generating this. So all of this code is basically boilerplate code, which sometimes comes with your HTML page, and you just change it according to your needs. Now what I'm going to do is I will, let's say, view the page. Oh no. Okay, this is how you would actually start coding. I'll remove all of this. When you create your new HTML page, whatever HTML page, sorry, you can press one exclamation mark, which is called an emit. Here, you can see it. It's called an emit, which is nothing but a way. It's like a shortcut to create code. So if I can press one exclamation mark and then press enter, all of that initial code is generated for you. Okay, you don't have to write it. So all of the initial code is generated for you, and you just change it. For example, here I can just change it to lesson 1. And I have the same exact code that I had before. Okay. Now in the body is where you will put all your elements. So for example, I will write, this is my first website as a paragraph, and I can write a heading also for hello there. Now if I go back and refresh, you can see there's a heading, which is here, and then there is a paragraph, which is here. So that is how you would generate a basic HTML page. Okay, this part is important and just know that you can generate it with just pressing an exclamation mark. If you don't have that option, if you're using another editor, then kind of just remember, it's not that difficult. Just remember that you need HTML, doc type HTML, then you need HTML. Language here just represents English. You can even get rid of this and it works fine. But when you generate, it comes with some default default things added. And then within the HTML tag, you have a head element, you have a body element, and within the head, you just give extra information about your website. And within the body is where you actually structure all your HTML code. So this is the basic HTML page. We'll look at another element, which is basically the list. So for example, I want to create a list of my favorite colors, I don't know, whatever you want to, but just let's look at how we can create lists. So to create a list, you have two options. You can either have an what is it called, unordered list. So basically something called unordered list, and then you have something called ordered list. Now you can see I've written something here which is green in color. This is considered a comment and comment don't show up in your code. So if I refresh this, that unordered list and ordered list will not show up here. Like you cannot see it here, but you can see it here because it's a comment. A comment is nothing but like a note in your code to help developers basically understand or know what is happening in the code. So we have something called, going back to lists, we have something called unordered list and we have something called ordered list. Unordered list is like bullet point lists, like it doesn't have any number, it doesn't have 1 2 3 4 5. But ordered list has 1 2 3 4 5 or A B C D, you know, some sort of like numbering happening there. So we'll see how to do both of them. To create an unordered list, you have to create a tag called UL, which is unordered list. Unordered, U for unordered and L for list. And it has a closing tag as well. So an opening tag and a closing tag for unordered list. Now, this just signifies that you're trying to create a list which is unordered. But within the list, you have different elements that you want to show, right? So I want to show my favorite colors. So I need to list them one by one. So for each of those items, I can say LI, which is called list item. So LI is an element for list item. And again, this also has an opening and a closing tag. And you will notice that LI is a child for the UL element. Okay, because you can see that it is within the LI element is within the UL element. So for example, my favorite color is black. The next favorite color is green. And then I also love blue. Okay, now if I save this and refresh, you can see that it creates a list for me, black, green, blue, but it's bulleted because it's unordered list. And if you want to see one by one, you can see this whole section is your unordered list. This is one list element, this is next, this is next. But the whole thing is within one element, which is called the UL element. So that's UL. You can do the same thing for ordered list. The only thing that changes is U becomes O. This will give you an ordered list. So if I refresh now, you can see the same list shows up, but now it is in 1 2 3. I can change the 1 2 3 to something else as well. Now, by default, the ordered list shows up as 1 2 3. But you can specify a change. You can say, okay, I don't want 1, 2, 3, I want ABC as the listing number. So what you can do is you can add something called an attribute. Okay, what is an attribute? Attribute is something that just gives extra information to your element. So for example, here I can write type, okay, and you can see here indicates the numbering type. You can either specify small letter a for lowercase elements, you can specify capital letter A for uppercase, you can specify I for Roman, capital I for uppercase Roman. One is by default 1, 2, 3. This is basically an attribute. I can specify type equal to double quotes or single quotes, and I can specify small letter a, for example. And if I save this, every time you do some changes, don't forget to save it, because if you don't save it, it will not show up here. I forgot to mention that. You have to save your changes. Okay, so if you refresh, you can now see the list is in small letter A, B, C format. You can change it to capital A and it will show up as capital ABC. Now, this is an attribute. Okay, what did we say initially? These are elements. Elements use tags to be written in HTML, and then every element can have many types of attributes, and attributes just specify a little bit more information to your elements. And attributes are always written this way. You type the name of the attribute equal to double quotes, and within the double quotes you specify something. Similarly, for UL also there are different types. I don't know why it's not showing up. I want you to see. Anyway, I can just show you like this. For example, disk. And if I save this, refresh. Oh, this is disk. Sorry, circle. And you can see it changed the bullets. And you can even, I think you can even make it square if I remember it. Yeah, so you can change that. You can change some specifics of your elements through attributes. So that is your list, the unordered list and the ordered list. And again, we have something called paragraph. You can see my favorite colors are, and then it displays the favorite colors as a list. So this is how you can structure your HTML code or structure your web page. So we've discussed attributes. Now, what if we want to display some links? Okay, for example, I want to display my LinkedIn. For example, I want to display a link to my LinkedIn profile. So how do we display links? We have something called anchor tag. Anchor tag is used to display hyperlinks. Okay, so if you write something as within the what is it called, a tag, it will show up as links. For example, LinkedIn profile. Save that. If I refresh it, right now it's just showing up as a normal text. I cannot even click on it. That's because I didn't specify where this link should go. So if I was to click on it, where should it go? I need to specify that as well. So for that, we have an attribute called href. Okay, now remember, this attribute href only belongs to a or the anchor tag, a tag or the anchor element. But if you try to write it for here, href, it will not work. So you need to know the attributes that belong, the attributes that are available belong to specific elements. Okay, so for example, here I want to, right now I don't know where I want to go, so I can just put hash. So if I save this and refresh here, now it shows up as a link. But if I click on it, nothing happens because it's just a hash in the href, right? So href is basically the place where you're going to go through this link. So the location of, or the URL for the link. So for example, I want to go to my LinkedIn profile, right? So I would write, it would be, or for example, let's go to Google, for example, google.com. This is where I want it to be redirected. So I copy this URL from here and I can just directly paste it here. It should be in this format. If you're trying to go to another website, it should be https://www.google.com in this case. And I can maybe just change it to Google. Okay. Now, if we refresh this and I click on Google, you will notice within the web page, within the same web page, the link has opened up for Google. Now, I can also do something like this. I can add another attribute called target, okay? And I can say blank _ blank. Save this, refresh. And now when I click on the link, it opens up in another tab or in a blank tab, okay? So these are other attributes that you can use. There are many others as well, but these are some of the attributes that you can use to, build basic content. Now, let's try to do something a little more complicated. So for example, I can create, okay, let's just get rid of this, and I can create something called my favorite colors. Okay, actually I had it. Why did I remove it? I can use the same thing. You can just remove this part. So my favorite colors, and we have an unordered list. I have a color black, correct? I want to show what that color is, right? So I want to maybe link to a Google search page that shows the color black, for example. I know this is a stupid example right now, but it's one that will help you learn the basics very well. So I want to show the color black. So I have the word black, and right next to the word, I want to, or just on the word itself, I want to make it clickable. So when someone clicks on the word black, it takes them to a Google page. So what I can do is I can wrap this word with the anchor tag or the anchor element. So A, okay, and within the A tags, I can move the word black. So if you notice, okay, and before seeing the change, we need to also add href, which is just hash for now. So now if I go back, you will see I can click on the word black, but I cannot click on the word green or blue. So the black is the word that is clickable because of the anchor tag. Now here, if I specify https www.google.com, save that, refresh. Now it opens Google for me, but again I wanted to open in a different tag, so target should be blank. Okay, now refresh, click on black, and it opens up a new tab. Now notice this is interesting. If I write, for example, I go back to English, I write black, for example, it shows something about black. But if you notice the URL, it says google.com/search?Q black. Okay, I'm just going to copy this for now, this part, forget whatever is after it, but just copy that part and paste it here. Okay, Now what is basically happening, it's going to a path called search, it's going to a page called search, and it's querying something with black. So this question mark Q just means you're sending some query, and your query or whatever you're asking is for black. You can do the same thing for green as well. So let me just close this from here. Yeah, you can do the same thing for green. Okay, target will be blank because I want it to open in another window, and the href should be the same exact thing, but black becomes green. Okay, because now I want to search for green, so all I can do is, instead of searching for black, I can just replace that part and search for green. And the same thing happens for blue. Href, just change black to blue, and target should be blank. It's just, when I save, what happens is it's formatting everything for me because I have something called Prettier installed. And usually if something goes after a certain number of characters, it moves it to the next line. So don't worry about that now. If it's not working for you, it's just a formatting thing. Now if I go back here, refresh, now all the 3 elements or the list items that I have are clickable. Okay, and then if I click on black, it opens a new Google search page for black search. If I click on green, it opens for green, and if I click on blue, it opens for blue. Okay, this is just a simple example to show you how links work and how we can open them in different tabs and how to make text clickable, all of that. So that's your anchor tag. Now if you write the whole thing, now you've noticed everything that we've written so far is usually in small letters. So body is in small letter, UL, LI, P, H1, head, everything in small letter except for doc type, which you can also write it in small letters, it's fine. This is just to let you know that you could have written the same thing in capital letters, and you could have written the same thing in here as well in capital letters. I don't know, by default it just goes to its original set. You can change, all I'm trying to say, you could have written the tags with capital letter and it will work, but it's recommended to follow the natural way, like the way that it's actually written, to make it easier for everybody to read. So that is about, like, basically it is not case sensitive. Case sensitive means if you write it in small letters versus in capital letters, there would be a difference. In this case, there is no difference. It will still work. Now, there's one thing that you should start realizing when you look at HTML code right now, is that if you hover, for example, if you hover over H1, you can see the H1 tag, for example here, takes the full width of the screen. Like it is from here to here. Even though we don't need that much space, it's taking the whole space. Any kind of an element that takes up the whole space or the whole width on the page is known as a block element. Okay, so H1 here is a block element. If I go to the paragraph element, it is also a block element because it's taking up the whole width. Right now, even if I just move this here, you can see it is still taking the whole width of the screen. So paragraph is also a block element. If you notice, UL, the unordered list element, is also a block element because it's taking the whole space. But when you go to the list element, it's not a block element because here it's taking only the space it needs. So the word black, how much space it requires, that would be the space of the, oh sorry, this is not the li, sorry, this is the a tag. You can notice here, I don't know how to hover it, but you can notice the little card that pops up. This is the a tag. So the a tag, they take only the width of the element. So how much ever space it requires, that much width they will take. Okay, they will not take the whole width. These kind of elements are called inline elements. Okay, so here we have our h1 is basically a block element, and for example our a tag is basically inline element. Right now you might not know the importance of this, but as soon as you start writing CSS, it's actually very important to know which element will show up as a block and which one will be an inline element, just to know where to position them. And you can always, like, you don't need to memorize any of this. You can always just come to this inspector and see, okay, h1 is a block element, a tag is a inline element. You can just look at them by just hovering on them. So if they take the whole width, they're block elements. If they take only the space that they require, it's an inline element. So that is about the block and the inline elements. We have something called, so far we've used h1, p, unordered, ordered, list element, anchor tag. We've used all of this, right? So all of these tags basically belong to something called semantic markup. I'll write it here, semantic markup. What does that mean? Semantic markup is nothing but tags or elements that tell you what they're being used for. So for example, if I look at the p tag, I know it's a paragraph, right? If I look at the h1 tag, I know it's a heading. If I look at the li tag, I know it's an element. If I look at the a tag, I know it's going to be a link. That will never change. They will always be the way they are, right? But there are some elements, for example, that you don't know what they are. So they are called non-semantic markup. So for example, div is a non-semantic markup, meaning you don't know what's a div. You don't know what it is used for, right? If I tell you, even if I tell you what it is used for, you can never guess what it is being used for. So semantic markup are basically elements that have a meaning, or they are used for a specific purpose, and when you look at the tag you can tell that this is used for this specific purpose. But non-semantic markup, you don't know what they're used for. They can be used for anything, literally anything. Okay, so one such example is the div tag, and div is nothing but content division. So you can basically use this tag to structure other elements. Okay, and a div tag is always a block element. So it will take up the whole width of your screen. So for example, within the div tag, I can create something else. I can write h1. This is a section, and I can say lorem basically generates some random text for you. Okay, so for example here, if I refresh, this is a section and then your paragraph. But if I look at the division here, again you can notice that the whole division is basically the whole division is a block, and then you have h1, you have the p tag. Okay, so why do we use divisions? We use divisions to structure different sections. For example, if we go back to this specific website, you can say that this specific, we can, let's say, inspect, and you can see that, see, this whole thing is one division. which is basically the upper navigation bar. Then you have another division for displaying, let's say, the update. You have another division for the main content. Right now you can see that it has an ID main content, but forget about IDs for now. But this whole section is basically the main content. Within this you have one section, one division that is, oh my god, one division that is basically showing you the whole here. One division that's basically showing you specific information, another division that's showing you some other information, another division that's showing you some other information. So you basically break your web page into different sections, which is divisions, and they're just helpful to style them together or to put them together in a web page. So you can just consider it a section for organizing your HTML code. So you have one division for this, and I can put all of this in another division. So I can remove all of this from here and add it to another division here. Okay, you don't have to, but usually it is recommended to group your web page into different sections and then create them into different divisions. So that is about divisions. Divisions are block elements, and we have something else called span element. Okay, we can use span. Again, on its own, it doesn't have a meaning. If you look at it, you don't know what it means, right? So it belongs to non-semantic markup, but it's also used just like division, and you can group anything together. For example, I can even write this is another section. If you save it, refresh it, you can see this is another section. But the only difference between span and div is that span is an inline element, and division or div is a block element. That's the difference. So if you want to just show something here and then something next to it, for example, I can add another span and say this is another one. This is yet another section, so it's different. You can refresh and you can see this is one span and this is the next. So if you want to maybe place items together, you would want them to be in line, because if you change this to div, one of them to div, for example, what is going to happen is it will push the next element on the next line, right? But there are cases where you want them to be shown in the same space. In that case, you will either make this, whatever element you're trying to show next to each other, you will make them in line through CSS, or you can use them in span if you don't want to go to CSS right now, which we don't want to because it will complicate things. So if you refresh, now you can see, okay, now they're put next to each other. And so this means that this is obviously a inline element, and if it takes up the whole space, it's usually a block element. Now inline and division, always remember division is a block element and span is an inline element. We have images as well, which we forgot about. You can display images in your HTML code. Okay, and so how can we do that? For example, I want to display an image here, and so I will use something called img. Img is an image element, and img does not have a closing tag. When you write the image tag, there is no closing tag for it. So how do you represent it? You would write image and then you would write slash and within the same tag but at the end. Okay, so this will represent an image tag. If I refresh here, you can see it added a little bit of space, but it doesn't show any image. That's because we didn't specify what the image is. Now to specify the image, you have to write the source, which is src, source of the image. The source of the image can be a link for an online image, or it can be an image that you have stored within your folder, your project folder. For now, let's say I want to show, what can we show? Mountains. I would go to this specific mountain, copy image address, go back and paste it in src. Okay, now if you save it and refresh it, you will see that same image here, but it's too long and I have to scroll it to see the whole thing. Not very pleasing, right? So what you can do is, there is an attribute for image tag which is called width, that will specify the width. Let's say I specify 100%. 100% means it's going to take the full width of the screen, and the height will be automatically adjusted. Okay, I can even say make it 50%, and if you refresh, now it's a bit smaller. It's 50%, it's half of the screen. And if you don't want to specify the width, you can even just specify the height, which I can say maybe make it, let's make it 100 pixels. The last time I used width, I used it with percentage. You can also use it with something called pixel, and we usually use pixels in styling. And if you refresh, this is 100 pixels. I can inspect it for you here, and you can see the height. I don't know how to point at it, but I can show it to you here. See, the height is now 100 pixels. The width, how much ever it will need to make it with a height of 100 pixels. But this is how you can basically specify the height or the width, because sometimes the images are too big. You don't want it to be that big, so you need it to be a certain size to fit your design. There's something also that we usually need to write, which is alternate text for the image. So for example, I can say this is a picture of mountains. Okay, this is used for accessibility purposes. So for example, if someone cannot really view the website, they have some tool that like reads it out to them. The alt is kind of helpful there, so that it can actually describe what is there in the picture. So a picture of mountains, if you refresh it, nothing really happens. You can't see that alternate text until the image no longer exists. I just made a mistake in the image URL. In that case, it shows an image icon because it doesn't know how to get the image, and it shows the alternate text for the image, which is a picture of mountains. This is one way. Okay, you can take the URL of the image and you can display it directly in your web page. Or I could have downloaded this. So I can save image as, okay, and then I can go to desktop, lesson 1. Now all your images should not be directly stored in this folder. So I have lesson 1 folder, that is my project folder, within which I have the Index.html. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder called images within this lesson 1 folder, and this is where I will store my image, mountains. Okay, now if you go here, you can see you have images folder which has mountains.jpg. Now if you look here, it's updated for you. You have now a folder for images which has mountains.jpg. Now instead of the link, I can just say, now the index file is here, correct? In order for me to get to the mountains image, I need to go into the images folder. So I have to specify that. I have to write, please go to the images folder first. Okay, and then within the images folder, you will find mountains.jpg. Please show that for me. So if you save that now, refresh it from here, you still have the image. Okay, but right now it's not coming from the link, from the URL. It's coming from your own local device, your own locally saved image. So that is how we add images. Now, I would recommend that, because there was so much information in this lesson, I would recommend that you try to create something on your own. So even if that means you remove everything from here, okay, and then you start from a new boilerplate, press exclamation, enter, it adds everything for you, and maybe create your resume or your CV. So I can say my resume. Okay, and you can have different sections. So one section, you can have it for your personal information, like your name, your email, your what else, phone number maybe. It's not shared anywhere, so you can write whatever you want there. And then you can have your another division for your, let's say, education. So your school, maybe university, maybe GPA for each, maybe the year you started, all of that. And then maybe another section for hobbies. So you have another division for hobbies, which can be a list basically. Okay. Maybe also add an image for yourself, your personal profile image. Okay. So I can maybe just give you like a starter here. You can say personal. Actually, H1 should be outside because it's the largest heading. I can write my name in H1. So, and then I can say H2, personal information. For this division, I want the heading to be education. And then for this one, I want the heading to be hobbies. Okay. If you refresh, you will see the name, personal information, education, hobbies. These I maybe change it to H3 because they're too big. So H3, H3, H3. Yeah, I think now it's better. You can put the profile, the name is already there. I can put my email. I'm showing this to you, but try to do it on your own so you kind of understand. You'll make mistakes in the beginning, you'll make some errors, but that's the only way to learn. So when you make mistakes, you go and Google things or ask someone, and then you can even ask in the comments. And then when you fix that mistake, you learn a little bit better because now you know how things actually work in that context. So here in personal information right now, let's say I want to write a paragraph, email, and my email address, whatever it is. I'm not going to write my email address here. And then your phone number as well. Again, I'm not going to write the phone number. +973. Okay. And maybe add a profile image. I'm not going to add an image right now for myself. Oops, sorry, not here. Let's just add it here, image. We need to close it. And then I'll probably look for default profile image just to show you now. copy image address, and you write that in src. It's a big one. And then let's make the width 100 pixels. Store that, refresh. Now you can see my image. Maybe let's make it a little lesser, 70. Okay, I can actually get rid of this because it's a little annoying. Yeah, so my name, my profile picture, email, phone number, and with education, what you can do is you can maybe create an unordered list. You can say your schooling, where did you get it done, or if you're in university, so university of whatever, and the year you started, whatever year, and then your schooling in the year you started. Okay, and if you have more, you can add more. And then for hobbies, again, you can add an unordered list. I love to teach, and I love to draw or sketch, and I love to code. Okay, if you refresh this now, you have a little bit of a profile that's nice. That looks, I mean, it's not that nice at all, but for someone who's learning for the first time, this is very good to know how to code if you can get this without any mistakes or errors. I think that's about it for this video. There are more things that I want to speak about HTML, but they come with CSS, so I think that's better for me to kind of explain that in the next lesson. So for now, these are the things you should know: how to create headings, how to create paragraphs, how to create lists, how to create links. Oh, here you can actually add a link as well, just to sum it all up. You can add links to your social platform. I'll create a division and just add a link for LinkedIn profile, and then href, I believe it is https www.linkedin.com/in. I'm not sure if this is the one, but let's see. Okay, yeah, this is the one. So it opens in the same page. I don't like that when links open in the same page, so it should open in a new page. So I think that's about it. You can the most important thing that we will focus on in the next lesson is how to build divisions using all of these simple elements, and how to structure a beautiful page, again with CSS, which is next lesson. So yeah, I think that's it for this one. I hope it was helpful. If you have any comments, if you have any issues, if you face any difficulties, feel free to write them in the comments and I'll try to help you out. But yeah, I think that's it for this time. See you in the next one. Goodbye.